What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Mindset Podcast. Today, we are joined by Larry Milian, who is the program director and show host at Slam Radio. I had the pleasure of going and visiting Slam Radio not too long ago with Robert Alonzo, and we checked out his studio. And let me tell you, man, it is next level. Their studio, their setup is crazy. They have a beautiful view. Definitely got to go visit it again sometime soon. But Larry, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me as a guest. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we're looking forward to having you. And first, we got to put you through our warm up round of questions before we get to the meat of things. So the first warm up question, Larry, is if you could be immortal, what age would you choose to stop aging at and why?
53.
Why
Really?
so? Why 53?
Well, I'm 53 now. Got a lot of wisdom in this life. Wouldn't want to live it with less wisdom than I already have. And I feel like if I haven't been at the prime of my life at any point, I am now. So what better time than the present? 53 it would be.
I love that attitude because a lot of people, we've actually never asked this question to anyone before. At least I don't believe so. But I can only imagine that people would have answered 25, 30, 35. They might have, what they consider their peak, right, or their prime, as people like to say. But I think that's so cool because honestly, for us, it gives us, hope, and we look forward to the future. A lot of people, a lot of our friends, they think that it's downhill from here. And then we look at people like you and we're like, dude, I can't wait to keep, getting older, keep getting better, keep getting wiser. So I think that's a huge lesson. But
I
I
always
love that.
decided to, I always decided to do things later. And I won a couple of flag football national championships. I was like a lot older than everybody else I played with by the tune of 8 to 10 years. And then obviously embarking on this, I feel like I'm the old man. Some of the kids I teach, I could be their grandfather. That's the difference in age that goes on. But I have to think really progressively. I have to think more like them because if not, I can't relate to them. So it's just kind of funny. But I think that the wisdom I've gained in 53 years makes me who I am today. Um, I think I would be a lot less like myself if I took it 10 years ago. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last 10 years that have made me who I am today. So I'm pretty cool with who I am today. In
Hmm.
fact, maybe not as cool as who I used to be once upon a time. So this is kind of a cool way to answer the question.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I'm so content with where I've. It's been a long journey, but it's been worth the hard work. That's for sure.
Larry, would you change anything that you've done? Would you go back and if you had a magic eraser or a magic pen and change any outcome or any decision you made in your life, would you?
So the weird answer to that would be what someone who thinks they're very uh, have depth and someone with depth and character would say, "Well, I don't regret anything in my life, the path and the journey." But I'm not. I think in the context of what you're asking, is there any one thing that if I'd have done it differently, I'd be doing something completely different that I might be content with? Yeah, I think there's one thing in particular I would have been pretty cool um, with happening and it not being have been this journey, which would have been a journey on TV. I had a TV opportunity that I ended up turning down, and I regret. Um, it wasn't every day TV came knocking, and I was kind of on the prime of what I was doing with Dos Amigos and these guys who have moved on to great things and are good friends of mine um, in the world of media and the world of broadcast. They came up with this idea, and I chose to not do it. And I regret it today because it would have been a pretty cool role for me. It would have been talking baseball on Spanish TV. Kind of position was built for me, and I decided I didn't want it. It was just weird. I regret that one. That one's pretty bad. Uh, that one's really bad actually. Other
No,
than that, the past's been pretty cool though.
Yeah, let's not think about that one too much. We're good.
We're
yeah,
cool with it. I have a face for radio anyway, so we're good.
Yeah.
you're good. I think it's really refreshing to hear what you're saying because yeah, like you mentioned, a lot of people would come on here. Oh, I don't have any regrets, and I'm sure there are people out there, and Anthony talk about this all the time. Like we were even talking about it on the in the car the other day on the way to lunch. Like if we would have just made one slight decision or one just a very slight change to some of the decisions and choices we made along our journey, what different paths we would have been on today. Like even like just going to like a different school, maybe playing a different sport. I think those are such, big, I guess, life decisions that we think about now, maybe not in at the time. But I think that's so cool to think. And I think we were talking to another guest not too long ago. I forget the name of the movie, but she said that there was a movie that came out recently that was exactly about that. It was a young lady that kind of went back in time and kind of explored the different avenues that would have been if she would have taken and made different decisions, which I think that's always super cool to kind of think back. But you can never really connect the dots until you look back. And I think, you're destined to what you're, to be on the path that you're on. But you can always, think and imagine what life could have been like if you would have done something different. But I think that's always interesting.
You got to be able to play that game and exclude regret from the moment you start to play it. So, in other words, it's cool to play it when you don't start saying, "Oh, I really messed up," because if you're going to do
Yeah,
that, then don't bother. Go do something else. Go play Monopoly. You know what I mean? But
exactly.
honestly, if you can do it and be reflective about it, which is like why my first answer was 53. At 33, I couldn't be reflective about some regret I have. At 53, I have no problem with it because it built me to be who I am. That's a mild regret to have if you think about the course of life. It was just, I continued with my career and I've done well for myself. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but certainly, I've had a few of those regrets, that's for sure, on a personal level as well as professional. But that's the one that kind of stands out to me because that one, I was going right on TV. I wasn't trying out for anything. It was my mind to keep and take, and I said no. So maybe I chickened out.
100%. No, but the flip side of that is, you still have so much time. If that opportunity come knocking, or you have the opportunity to create that, I think that's really cool. And history repeats itself at times, and I think that'll be something. If it's meant to be, it'll happen, and we see it. But next question of this little lightning round, I think this is going to be a fun one. If you could remove or eliminate any one thing from your daily routine, something that you do in the morning, in the afternoon, anything that you do daily, if you could eliminate one thing, what would that one thing be?
Uh
Wash
oh.
dishes.
Uh oh.
A problem when you live alone.
Wash
Uh,
dishes.
or my kids actually, they pick up the slack for me. I can't stand washing dishes. PTSD from basic training. They did an entire weekend. I spent the entire weekend washing dishes, and then I spent many years married to someone who obsessed on making sure the dishes were always cleaned, and to not hear her complain, I would wash the dishes. So
Uh,
it's become such an issue for me that now I don't want to wash a dish.
yeah.
And it's just I'll use a paper cup or a paper plate before I have to wash a dish. I just don't want to wash a dish. So yeah, that's the one thing I can
Interesting.
eliminate. That would be the one.
Interesting. Oh, I don't, Gabe and I were not expecting that answer. That
Yeah.
was interesting. I love it. I love it. Washing dishes. I don't like that too. That thank God for dishwashers. I just boom, stick it in the dishwasher, call it a day, and move forward.
And I
Um,
have one of those. I just don't use it, but I may have to start
you
entertaining the thought of
you might
using
have to,
it.
yeah. No, but awesome. So that's our little lightning round of questions. Very unique answers, Gabe. I don't think we've ever gotten answers like that, which is always something exciting for us. But Larry, let's get started here. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do and who you are?
So my name is Larry Milian. I am the general manager. I know the Temptation to Say program director. That's actually my daughter, Amanda Milian. I am the general manager and radio host on the morning show at SiriusXM 145 Slam Radio. But I run Slam Radio. It's the first and only national radio station run inside of a high school. Our high school students take classes that are tied to the radio station. They run a live radio show. They are in charge of their own podcast and their podcast network. They learn technically everything that it takes to run a radio station, and then they do so during class. Uh, that's the name of the game. I wrote the curriculum from day one. It's never been written before. It's never been done before. It's unprecedented. And I got lucky. I guess Pitbull remembered me from one of the times he called my show, and I got lucky. I got hunted down literally, and then they got lucky in finding me. The person who was hunting me down all along, his best friend was one of my best friends, and when he figured it out, he goes, "Hey, let's just take him to lunch." And when I got to lunch, within 5 minutes, I had a job offer, and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Are you serious? Yeah, this is for you."
Nice,
And Pitt had
nice.
told me, "Some guy out there who talks sports. He's crazy. Go get him." And I used to go on his show. I don't remember his name, and it was me. So sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. The one thing I thought is I was coming in to run a radio station and host a radio show. Little did I know I was going to need to become a teacher in the process. And that's been probably the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life professionally, because I just wasn't built to be a teacher. That was initially not what I thought would be the case. And I get choked up and I get emotional about it because I've worn a lot of hats in my life. I've always been good at sales. I've always been the department head or supervisor or director or something. Um, but the one thing I've never done well, like school's never an environment that was copacetic for me when I was younger. As I got older, I understood it, and I became PTA president for a couple of years at my kids' elementary school, and I was very involved in schools and understood the notion of it. I was married to a woman who was a career teacher with a family of career teachers, so I quickly became embedded into what education was. I learned all the ins and outs of it, but the last thing I ever thought was that I was going to be in a classroom saying, "Hi, my name is Mr. Milian, and I'm your fifth period teacher." When the reality of that set in, I started working with the foundation in 2016. I hit the classroom in 2017. When the realization of that set in a little over 5 years ago, it was tough. It was a change of pace for me. We did not have the radio station built. We still had to go with construction and launching the radio station. I was in charge of procuring what seemed to be $500,000 of equipment, but really ended up being not so much. But I was in charge soup to nuts of everything. The only thing I had was plans that were already drawn out. And I didn't even like the way they drew out the plans, and I couldn't change them. So we just had to live with the way they were drawn out. And the rest was a quest to get this radio station open inside the school and create a curriculum for students that were wondering what this class was going to be about. And you want to talk about a professional challenge. I had never done one of those things, both of those things. One of them in particular, I had never done any semblance of it, which was being a teacher. And the other, even though I'd been on radio for years, I had never been in an executive position. 150 of me in the world, which is you run a national radio station, you run, on a satellite radio platform. There's 150 of us, so it's kind of a weird position to have. It's not like being a CEO, but it's a very unique trade to have. And there's some things that we do that are different than terrestrial radio stations. So when you do that and have to teach 6 classes, it's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, when I met you, Larry, and I learned about your program and what your kids are doing, and they're hands-on with the podcast, and they're learning the ins and outs and the equipment and what this microphone does and stuff like that. I told Gabe, man, how cool is that? Of course, this is our stuff. We love doing the podcast. So I'm thinking, man, if I had this opportunity in high school, I would have jumped on it. I would be such a much better podcaster today. I'd be much more involved. So so kudos to you. I mean, that really gets me excited that kids are learning this, and hopefully there's a big push for new podcasts and more interest in this industry. But my question, Larry, is how this being so unique, right? Because I don't know many schools that have this kind of class offered where they teach
You can
kids about.
knock the M off instead of many. You don't know any school because there is none that has.
I don't know any school. How so? In that case, how did you convince kids, or how did you get kids involved, like wanting to take your class, because it's something brand new? How'd you do it?
It's so funny because I talked to them years later. Now I'm getting kids that are graduating that started with me 5 years ago, and you hear them say the stories about when they met me. One of the things that stands out is I weighed about 80 pounds more than I do now. I lost a lot of weight in the process.
Nice.
And they remember a big, jolly old fat guy, coming in and telling them that they were going to be on the radio. And they thought I was crazy. And I would take them to this empty, cavernous, dirty room and tell them, we're going to do this. We're going to put this here. We're going to put that there. And I was building dreams.
Wow.
And they were looking at each other and laughing. And I remember they would laugh when I take them to the room. Little did they know that I would spend my lunches sitting in the middle of that room, looking around and trying to imagine what it was going to be like. Sorry. That journey was pretty interesting for me, man. So I look back on those days and I remember that I was making a dream in my head, and to make it become a reality is just pretty humbling. But I sold them on the dream that I sold myself on. And some of them bought and some of them didn't. The ones that bought have had a lifetime of memories. I don't focus on teaching them radio. I focus on teaching them to learn about themselves and their own voice. That they live in a world where communication is going to be key. And the person that stays quiet is the person who's going to finish in last. And they're starting to get it. They're starting to understand it. And I got to be honest with you, it's been a life-altering experience for me. I went from liking other people's kids to being empowered to help these kids on their journey. Little Havana is a place where a lot of first-generation Hispanic Americans attend our school. And at home, they're telling them, oye, cállate, no digas nada, no te busques ningún lío. And they're just taught not to say a word. And little do we know what's going on at home after 3 o'clock. But when they come to us, sometimes that gleam in their eyes tells you everything you need to know. And um, I do the very best I can of telling them the positive things of life. They come sometimes with some of the negative stuff, and I try to bring in a positive spin to it. There's been some tough times we're living in the last few years. Even that gets difficult. That's harder than actually teaching them how to speak up and say what they're feeling. But selling them on the ability to speak up in a world where they feel kind of encaged and they can't do so, that's been a big selling point. Almost 70% of our students at Slam Radio are girls. And that's the hardest part to believe because they're usually the timid ones, the quiet ones. They're the ones that want to learn their voice. They're the ones that want to speak up. It's unbelievable. They are our leaders. They are the best. The previous 3 student general managers have been girls. So, it's a woman's world, and they've been wanting to learn their own voice, and it's been amazing to see them blossom and bloom. Girls that were afraid of their own shadow, that then they jump on the mic and they're running things. It's empowering to teach them that and see them grow with that. But it's also humbling to learn that you're a big part of their growth. It makes it. Both of my kids went through the program and took a lot out of it, not because dad was teaching it, but because the program allows you that voice.
Yeah, I think that's so unique, and I wanted to touch on something that you had mentioned, and that was, not teaching them how to use equipment. I'm sure they learned all those tools and you equipped them with what they needed to go into this industry. But something that you said is how to give them a voice, for them to use and find their voice. And I think that's so important for the life and the society that we're living in right now. But even going a little bit back further, when you were mentioning how you didn't feel like you were even equipped to be a teacher, this was probably one of the scariest things that you probably would have done. And I could even tell that you were getting emotional. And at least from the teachers that I've had, my sister works with kids. My mom is a former teacher. I've been surrounded by these people that are meant to impact other kids and other children, even young adults. But the common denominator that I get with all of those people is that those kids probably impacted them more than they would have ever imagined. And I wanted to ask you, is that something that you can attest to? Is that something that over your career with Slam and the kids that you've been able to teach and to be able to impact, do you think that that's been able to give you more of your voice and find your voice in this society that we're living in and give you that impact?
That was a great question, man. Listen, the bonds that are created through this program, it's very hard to explain. I work by this. My right hand man is my best friend of life, Frank Fernandez. Um, to be able to share that dream with him, a guy that I mentored when nobody gave him a chance on radio, and then for us to give these kids a chance to learn their own voice is very empowering. Um, what we learn is that we get a lot from them and they don't realize it. I often tell them we learn a lot from you, a lot more from you than you know. We care a lot about you, a lot more than you know, because they are very used to the typical student teacher relationship. The ones that are in the program more than a year figure out what's going on, and it's a bond. And they call me Milian because they have to call me Milian. The reason I get choked up is because I think of the 4 different students, former students that I've had that have asked me to be their godfather in the course of the last 5 years. I can't help but get choked up. Um, Little Havana is a tough town. A lot of people don't understand that it's adjacent to Alapata and it's adjacent to some tough parts of Miami. And some of the kids in Little Havana don't have the easiest times. And the teachers of their schools are the people in the front lines trying to do the best they can so that those kids, can get the best out of life as best as possible. Um, we see some dastardly things sometimes, man. And uh, I have to sometimes put on blinders and focus on teaching them their voice. And when you become attached to a few of them, when you realize that these are bonds that you've created that are going to go much further, much longer than just I've known you for 3 years and have a great life. Um, it emulates that of a coach. You know what I mean? Um, you might leave a program in college, but your coach is always your coach. And I like how these kids look to me that. But when you have 4 kids asking to be their godfather, 4.
Wow.
Um, you wonder to yourself, goodness gracious, what kind of impact are we really having?
Mm,
It's incredible. But I get choked up because, yeah, man, I learned so much from them, Gabriel. I know some of the phrases of today, I would never know them. I wouldn't know
mm,
anything about what goes on today if it weren't for them. And we
mm,
share it on the show, and I allow myself to be vulnerable.
mm,
The tough conversations about gender and other things, I allow them to teach me on the air so that I show adult vulnerability so that
mm,
kids are comfortable instead of being jerks about how to tell an adult what's right from wrong. And maybe they're empowered to educate us about some of those things, whether we agree with them or not.
mm.
Um, and that's the beauty of communication. The communication kind of solves everything when people are deciding that they're going to listen and they're going to speak. They're not going to just argue and scream. So we teach them that. We don't allow them to raise their voices.
Mm.
Often they do because they're very passionate.
Yeah.
But we learn. I know I do. I learn about as much from them as they learn from me. I'm marveled by that.
Mm. And Larry, what would you say with your experience in working with young adults, right, high school students? What would you say is, I don't know how to put it, maybe the biggest issue that you see that it mindset wise that these students have? Is there something they're lacking that you would like them to, fix sooner rather than later? Maybe turn around something, that
There
they're
are there are things in life that are called gifts. There are things in life that are called curses.
right,
And then there are things in life that are a gift and a curse.
right.
One of those things is the almighty phone.
Mm,
It's a gift because it's powerful.
mm-hmm,
So much information is available to you through this,
right,
but it's also a curse because it takes their attention away from some of the things about living life that are good.
right,
Taking a whiff of the roses and walking outside. And the technology has done some good things and some bad things. Our biggest struggle is the fight against technology. Um,
Yeah.
Schools have had to give in somewhat. My program, it's a part of what they do. Because if I'm asking them to research information, um, you can't do it unless you have some sort of technology. Um, in class, we empower them, but we also give them iPads. We tell them to put their phones away and use the iPads to search up the stuff. So they're not communicating with their friends or whatnot. But ultimately, it's the biggest challenge we have is getting them to curb that usage. As they get older, they're a little more cognizant of it, but it's still a problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The fact that there is a generation gap, no matter how hard I try to learn everything they want to teach me, there's days that they're moody and they come in a certain way, and I'm an old school brother that doesn't take that crap, and and then sometimes it's two heads colliding. That doesn't happen very often because I'm pretty understanding of them. I like believing that unlike other adults, I get teenagers. Um, so I do things like, when you tell one of them is off, like, today's a day off. What do you mean today's a day off? You got nothing to worry about. Just get over it so that you're better for next class. We'll figure out how to make up whatever we got to do. And I do things like that. And I've had many times, I don't know how you realized it, Mr. Milian, but I needed that. Thank you. What do you need me to make up? And, if you show them that you're a partner in their development, not somebody who's fighting against them, you get a lot more from them. That's something Pitt taught me when I started there. My first few weeks, I asked him, what do you think, Pitt? And he's like, listen, I don't want to use the bad word he used, but he said they have a good BS meter, to not use the word. He goes, they know if you're not real. So be yourself. If you can be yourself with them and communicate with them, you're going to get a lot more from them that way than pretending to be something you're not. And here I am 5 years later. I'm in shock that they take to me the way they do. Um, but I don't think we pray for summer vacation as teachers, right? Um, when it gets here, I was like, yesterday we had some of the kids come in. I couldn't function without having some teenagers in there functioning and doing things. It just doesn't seem right. As
Driving
much
you
as we
crazy.
say, yeah, as much as we say we want them
Yeah.
out of there, no, we don't want them out of there. It's part of what we do. It's part of who we are.
Nice, nice. I love it. And as we kind of come to an end here, Larry, I want to give you this opportunity. You've given us a lot of knowledge already and a lot of great advice, but 30 seconds, what's the best piece of advice you can give anybody listening to this podcast right now who may hear from you again in the future, but this, for a lot of them, may be the last time they hear from you, from Larry Milian? What would be your piece of advice?
So I'm going to give you some life advice. It's the corniest thing I've ever heard in my life is said to me. You can do whatever it is you want to do if you put your mind to it. Well, if somebody would take the time to reword that, they'd understand that there is reality and there is some truth to that statement. The truth is, with hard work, with dedication and with a vision, you can achieve anything you want to achieve. And the proof is, if you can go from being a radio hack like myself to becoming a teacher, to developing a program like this, to becoming, listen, I tell people I'm not a teacher. I won Teacher of the Year this year. Like that, like I'm floored by even saying that, because that's not even something that is in my scope of understanding, right?
Let's go. That's awesome.
So if something like that can happen, little old me, trust me when I tell you, if you're listening to these words of advice, take a minute, take a deep breath. Remember that you too are special. And with that vision and with hard work, dedication, you can achieve any vision you want to achieve. Just put your mind to it. It sounds corny. I reword it because I hate the way everybody says it. But work your tail off. Have a goal. You'd be surprised what will happen.
I love that. And as we wrap up here, I couldn't let you go, before asking you this, and taking it back again to something that you had said um, about vulnerability. And I think Anthony and I, he could probably agree with me that in podcasting, which is a huge part of radio communications, and like you mentioned, it's a big part of the future that we're stepping into. I think even when you mention social media and technology and the devices that we have at our fingertips every single day, you know that comparison, that ability to be able to put yourself in a vulnerable state is so feared by a lot of people. And something that I've noticed particularly, and I think you can agree, is that vulnerability, especially on the air, on a podcast, just in conversation, I think gets so much deeper and is so much more relatable. And even as a teacher, because I feel like as long as I can remember, most of my teachers that I maybe not had liked so much, or didn't have the greatest relationship, it was because they were almost like my enemy. And I think where you're getting at is that your approach to teaching and your approach to leadership in general is that you're not the enemy, you're the ally. You're there to help them. You're there to partner with them. And you can only do that by being yourself, by being authentic, by being relatable, by being vulnerable. And I just wanted, to get your thoughts on that. If you could leave our listeners with anything at all, on vulnerability and how they can maybe take on, the future coming, and their careers ahead. And even for some of your students, as if you were to tell your students, what would you tell them in terms of vulnerability to really just put yourself out there? And sometimes that might come back and hurt you because you might be putting too much of yourself out there. But from what Anthony and I have learned, is a lot of the people that have really given all that they have, even ourselves, even the listeners, even the guests that we've had on, that they just pour out with everything that they have. Those have been some of the most powerful conversations that we take away. But I just want to get your thoughts on that. What is something that you would tell maybe your students or anyone listening, to be able to put themselves in a position of vulnerability to get to where they want to be?
I'm blessed to teach a class where the best lesson plans are the mistakes that I've made in my life. Yes, I teach them how to broadcast into a mic. I teach them how to use Adobe Audition, teach them how to run a board, teach them how to broadcast, teach them a myriad of things. But the one thing I like to teach them is to understand who they are, and know what the hell they're talking about when they get on that mic. Kids like to say, "Oh, I think I know," and they don't know crap. So you have to hold them accountable for when they say something. Make sure they know what the hell they're saying. Um, that plays a big role in what we do in our class. But I think it's the best way I could put this. That vulnerability you're talking about, if I show them vulnerability up front, if I show them that I don't mind being a kook in front of them, that I don't mind being zany as long as I'm trying to make a point to them, and I show them that I give a hoot from the get-go, they allow to put their guard down. I invite you to come first day of school, come to the studio, and you're going to see kids like this. They may not figuratively have their hands up, but they walk in like they are not in an inviting mood. They're just not.
Right.
So my job is to bring down that guard and have them absorb what I'm teaching them. It's not in a book. Kids are usually, you give me the book, I'll read the book. Don't talk to me, teacher. Oh, this teacher's got to talk to them. If not, I can't teach.
Right.
And I have to adapt. I have kids that are ESOL that don't speak English. What do you do with them? It's easy. Teach them how to run the board, teach them how to edit, and then when it goes to broadcast, tell them do it in Spanish. They go, ¿Cómo fue, profe? Oh, yeah. Hablo en español sin problema. Pero todo el mundo lo hace en inglés. Everybody's doing it in English. Yes, so what? You do it in Spanish. And what ends up happening, it's invariably almost undefeated, this strategy, is you go about it, and before the end of the year, they tell you, can I try it in English this time? And you go, please do. Sometimes I tell you, please don't put it on the air. Others will just ask you, can I try it in English this time? Yep. And now what have you done? They've developed their own confidence at their own pace. They've created their own pacing guide for confidence. There's no curriculum you can write for that except empowering them and letting them know that on that journey, you're right by their side. You're not trying to defeat them.
Mm.
I tell them, I'm trying to give you guys an A. You guys are the ones that talk yourselves out of the A every time.
Mm.
So, I create that environment where they feel like, oh gosh, I have an ally in this. I feel like a kid's being honest, but they might be late with a deadline. I might give them a break. You know why? Because they're communicating. They're not running away from me. They're coming to tell me, listen, I caught a snag. I know it's due at 8 o'clock. I'll have it at the end of the day. Do it. Let me know when it's done. And I won't clip them for it. It's a humanistic approach to something that we've all been in class and hated our teachers because of how they've gone about the grade book. Because I got to do it. A lot of type A personalities in teaching. Well, let loose a little. Be vulnerable, and you'd be surprised what you get in return. I teach a class, and God bless those teachers that teach math, social studies, language arts. They are a gift to society. But I teach a class that I've got to get out of my kids something. If not, we've got nothing. The meat and potatoes is what they give me. So how do I get out of them what I need? I have to empower them. I have to make them believe that I'm a teammate, not an opposing team. And that helps a great deal. And when you make them feel that and you let them see yourself be vulnerable, and sometimes I purposely say something wrong so they can correct me. Okay, I got it wrong. Yay. A lot of teachers are filled with pride and ego. Stop. They're kids. They're kids. You all raised your own kids, right? You probably did it without any pride. Well, now you're helping raise other people's kids. Use the same tactics.
There you have it. That's the playbook of the teacher of the year right there on how to be a good teacher, right out of the playbook.
Let me tell you, the teachers of the year are the family members behind your brother in arms, Roberto Alonso.
Roberto Alonso.
Yeah, well, his sisters Christy and
Jessica.
I'm sorry, I drew a blank for a minute. Christy and Jessica, like Hall of Fame teachers. Like Jessica's been doing it 20 years, and she gets to them young, first, second grade. Yeah. And you may not realize that there's a lot of that stuff that goes on early. And God bless those first, second grade teachers. I don't remember what grade Christy was teaching, but both of them are very, very powerful young ladies that are behind Robert's efforts and everything that he does.
Oh, yeah.
So it's always cool to see that. But no doubt. We are excited about the future of Slam Radio. We're excited about a lot of the things that are coming down the pike. And I invite both of you to come. Come do a radio show with me one morning, both of you.
Let's do it.
For yourself, you think it's scary doing a podcast? Do live radio for 4 hours. We'll have some fun for real.
Let's do it.
Nice. Well,
you guys are invited whenever you want this summer. We'll come through.
Thank you, Larry. We'll make it happen. And thank you. We'll leave it here. Thank you so much for your advice, your wisdom, always pouring yourself out, being vulnerable like we talked about. We're here in your corner. Whatever you need, we're here for you. You're part of the Mindset family now. So we'll stay in touch, and we'll definitely join your radio show. Thank you for joining.
Come by this summer, my man. Come by.